for my mom outside her doctor's appointment. I thought we would read chapter 6 of our book, Killing Crazy Horse. It's about the Merciless Indian Wars in America by Bill Reilly. I have already read the first 5 chapters, so we might have time to read chapter 6. So let's get started. Hope you're having an excellent Thursday. We got a cold front. They're all black in the sky. There's a black and the rain's coming. So hopefully it won't be so bad. Alright, so chapter 6, May 19th, 1836. In Fort Parker, Texas, 10 o'clock a.m. 78-year-old John Parker knows he may soon be facing death. On this warm spring morning. Okay, let's see if we can start again. 78-year-old John Parker knows he may soon be facing death. On this warm spring morning, a band of Native Americans numbering in the hundreds galloped toward his family's fortress. Even their women are on horseback. Parker was warned that this moment was coming, yet he is a prideful man and ignored those messages. Now Parker and perhaps his entire family are just moments away from paying for his foolishness. It was 2 years ago when Congress passed a law making it illegal for white men to settle west of the Mississippi River. If necessary, the U.S. Army is authorized to arrest anyone found in violation of the 1834 Act to regulate trade and intercourse with the Indian tribes and to preserve peace on the frontiers. Passed into law 2 decades after the massacre at Fort Mims. This legislation fulfilled Andrew Jackson's long-held ambition to permanently separate Indians and whites by creating a Native American sanctuary west of the Mississippi. When my grandmother, Johnny Claire Whitlow, well, her name was White, married my grandfather, George Whitlow. She didn't look Native American. She cut her hair, wear a lot of makeup so she could fit into the white people's world. It was even against the law back then when she married. Alright, but settlers like Parker, who treats the Indians with contempt and believe land is theirs as a gift from God, do not respect the U.S. government or any laws that may inhibit their ambitions. So while John Parker's fort, an 18,000-acre farm, is more than 400 miles west of the Mississippi, he has made sure this new law does not apply to him. Isn't that particular of so many people? For Parker no longer resides in the United States of America, but in the Republic of Texas, a sovereign nation that declared its independence from Mexico just 2 months ago. The law's full name is an act to regulate trade and intercourse with the Indian tribes and to preserve peace on the frontiers. Congress passed it on June 30th, 1834, declaring that no whites were allowed to settle on Indian land or trade with the Indians. The mandate was so ineffective that a second law establishing a permanent Indian frontier was passed in 1840. this law too was ignored. Alright, so where are we at? John Parker was born in Maryland and grew up in Virginia. In his youth, he fought in the Revolutionary War, battling Native American tribes loyal to the British alongside Daniel Boone. The legendary frontiersman made such an impression on Parker that upon marrying Sarah Sally White in 1779, he named his first son Daniel. John and Sally Parker moved to Georgia in 1785, seeking to escape the Indian attacks that bedeviled Virginia and its governor, Patrick Henry. Parker made a name for himself for his bravery, fighting Indians, but longed to flee the hostilities. From Georgia, the family traveled to Tennessee, then on to Illinois. John became a widower in 1825, but remarried soon after to a woman whose name is also Sally, though she is known most frequently as Granny. The relocation to Texas came 3 years ago. Enticed by the prospect of free land, John Parker migrated south with a caravan of 30 ox carts, bringing his grown children, their spouses, and his grandchildren to this vast land of rolling hills and thick oak forests, the westernmost location of any fort in the Republic of Texas. The closest white settlement is 60 miles away. And because Parker no longer resides in the United States, he does not enjoy the protection of the U.S. Army. In the event of an Indian attack, the refuge they have built is their only hope to stay alive. The 1-acre stockade is designed to repel any attack. Blockhouses, an ample number of gun ports, and walls 15 feet high make this a true fortress. The front gate has been extensively reinforced so that it is bulletproof. In all, 6 families made the journey to Texas with John Parker. More than half are women and children. 57-year-old Daniel Parker is not among the Parker clan, having parted ways with his father in a schism over the religious fundamentalism years before. It is the separation that will save Daniel Parker's life. For in the aging John Parker's thirst to possess this small kingdom on the Texas frontier, he is taking on an enormous risk. Texas is a land of tornadoes, thunderstorms, searing heat, poisonous snakes, blood-sucking insects, and snapping turtles. There is an abundance of warlike Indian tribes as well, among them the Cherokee, Tawakani, Kichai, and Caddo. It is the Caddo who have named this vast land Tasha, which the Spanish spell as Tejas. To the Caddo, Tasha means a friend or an ally, but of all the tribes in Texas, one band stands alone as no one's amigo. These Indians call themselves New Menu, or people, and are so warlike that the Ute tribe has christened them Comanchia, which translates to anyone who wants to fight me all the time. Whenever sign language is utilized to communicate between tribes that do not speak the same language, The speaker places his forearm flat in front of him and wriggles it back and forth to describe the cometia. This is also the sign word for snakes. Once again, the Spanish changed cometia to a word they could understand better. Thus this tribe, so legendary for the atrocities they inflict upon their victims, is fearfully known as the Comanche. For months, the Comanche have been terrorizing ranches and settlements in eastern Texas. There have even been two separate reports from friendly Indians that Fort Parker will be attacked. One of them stating the morning of May 19th as the time it will occur. Because of this, Texas Governor Sam Houston has ordered Parker to evacuate his property, a demand the settler ignores. Now the Comanche are 200 yards outside Fort Parker, and as at Fort Mims, someone has carelessly left the bulletproof front gate wide open. 11 of the fort's male inhabitants are far out in the fields, leaving just 6 men inside to defend the 8 women and 9 young children, all of whom are now in a panic. Mothers grab their children by the hands, rushing towards the low doorway of the back gate, hoping to escape into the nearby woods. Recognizing that he has been a fool, old John Parker grabs Granny's hand and races after them. Some will make it, most will not, and some will suffer horrendously. The Comanches sit patiently atop their mounts. The morning air is eerily silent. Conversations are muted, and their well-trained horses remain still. In addition to rifles, knives, and a battle axe tipped with a 2-pound flint stone, each man is armed with a sharpened, steel-tipped lance 7 feet long, in the manner of a European knight. This is a weapon best suited for combat on horseback, and the Comanche are trained to impale even the smallest of prey at a full gallop. A white flag of truce is held high for the inhabitants of Fort Parker to see. An attack right now would easily overwhelm the whites, and the open gate would certainly make the raid easier than most. But despite their reputation, these Comanche warriors want nothing more than a cow to slaughter in directions to a well where they might water their horses. This is not their first visit to Parker's Fort, although it is the first time the settlers have seen them. These Comanche have long hunted and raided in eastern Texas and watched from afar as John Parker built his fortress in the midst of the prime hunting ground. The Comanche people once resided in Snake River region of the Rocky Mountains and were part of the Shoshone tribe. But the two bands split centuries ago for reasons that remain unclear. The Shoshone drifted farther north into what is now Idaho, living a subsistence lifestyle. The Comanche traveled south to lands controlled by the Spanish and the Apache, a direction that would change their fate dramatically. Once a band of nomads who traveled on foot in search of food, the Comanches soon learned to ride the horses the Spaniards first introduced to North America in the late 1600s. It is impossible to overestimate the profound change these animals made to the Comanche and to every other tribe west of the Mississippi. The horse gave them mobility, allowing them to hunt and raid whenever they pleased. Escaping from enemies became much easier. No longer confined to the mountains, the Comanche made a life for themselves on the broad expanse of the plains, once too vast for them to cross easily. Horsehair could be woven into rugs, ropes, and bridles. Prior to the horse, dogs were used to transport personal belongings on special harnesses known as travois. But dogs lack the power of a horse and cannot feed on the grass and bark found in abundance on the plains. In the rare event of starvation, a horse could be slaughtered and eaten, not so a dog, against the eating of which the tribe had a religious superstition. The Comanche are now among the very best horsemen in the world, trained to ride from a young age. At a full gallop, a Comanche warrior is capable of leaning all the way down to the ground, grabbing a human being and pulling the person back up onto horseback. Because the horse and then the rifle, there is nothing that now stops the Comanche from reigning over the entire southwestern plains. They live in teepees made of buffalo hide, supported by as many as 18 poles that can be taken down and reassembled quickly. The Comanche will forage for nuts and berries if necessary, but their primary source of food is buffalo, for which they roam hundreds of miles to hunt. The Comanche, the Comancheria, as the land of the Comanches is known, extends thousands of square miles from Texas all the way to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and into the nation of Mexico. This territory was not granted them outright, but acquired through a century of war that established Comanche dominance. First the Utes, then the Kiowa, Osage, Arapaho, Tawanconi, the Wichita, Waco, and Cochise were either conquered or settled for a peace that allowed the Comanche to live and hunt wherever they pleased. France had designs on pushing west of the Mississippi from its stronghold in Louisiana. So too the Spanish, with their hope of connecting territorial claims in the Pacific Northwest with their large holdings in Mexico. Despite a century of attempts to pacify, evangelize, or crush the Comanche outright, both nations failed to expand their empires. Regular Comanche raids on European settlements throughout the 18th and early 19th centuries soon forced most to be abandoned. Spanish horses were the coveted plunder of these surprise attacks, enriching the Comanche through trade with other tribes too timid to attempt such larceny. It is the Apache, however, whom the Comanche have devastated the most. There was a time when the Apache lived in New Mexico and Texas, but the Comanche migration put that to an end. While the Comanche roamed the prairie unafraid, the Apache were forced to retreat to desert mountains far to the south. This is the only terrain where they hold superiority over the Comanche, and yet the warring attacks continue. Regular Comanche raids against the Apache net slaves, horses, and mules, all of which are used for barter, most frequently for bullets and rifles. In addition to trade with tribes north of the Comancheria, these weapons were also acquired from the French and Spanish. Despite the hostilities between them and the Comanche, after the Louisiana Purchase of 1803 by the United States, followed by Mexican independence in 1821, Spain and France abandoned any claim to the southern plains. In their place came the Americans. At first, the Comanche were eager to trade with the new white settlers. In 1825, an American trade expedition met peacefully along the banks of the Brazos River with a Comanche delegation. Prior to Texas becoming an independent republic, a delegate from the United States named Sam Houston met with the Comanche to discuss a peace treaty. It was Houston who went over the wall against the Creek Indians at the 1814 Battle of Horseshoe Bend and was shot in the leg as a result. The war heroes' negotiations with the Comanche did not initially result in success, but on April 24, 1835, an agreement was reached between the Comanche and the United States of America, allowing tribes relocating from land east of the Mississippi to hunt in peace on Comanche lands in Texas. The Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Creek tribes are already being relocated. My family's Choctaw. Without this permission from the Comanche, Andrew Jackson's Landmark Act to preserve peace on the frontiers, forever dividing America into Indian and white, would be impossible. But Texas independence rendered the 1835 agreement useless. And as more settlers moved into the new republic, building their homes near clear water, a rarity in Texas, where sediment clouds most rivers and lakes, and on the pastures best suited for feeding Comanche horses, the tribe chafed at the presence of the newcomers. Rather than be at peace with the whites, the Comanche began raiding their settlements, just as they once terrorized the Spanish and the French. So it is that the settlers of Texas live in fear. Most of these guerrilla actions take place during daylight, but during the blinding full moon of October, when the night sky is bright, Indian raids take on a brand new form of terror. This Comanche moon period means attacks can come at any time. Wherever the Comanche raid, whether by night or day, a trail of violence follows. Vengeance-seeking warriors mutilate and murder most of the men, gang rape the women, and slaughter the infants, if only because babies are difficult to carry while making a quick escape on horseback. But for young boys and girls captured during these raids, there is a different fate: kidnapping. The Comanches' wandering ways and long days on horseback make it difficult for their women to carry babies to term. snatching young girls and boys from other tribes, then raising them as Comanche, keeps the tribal population high. Now well aware that women and children reside within Fort Parker, the Comanche watch as a middle-aged man steps alone from the split cedar walls of Fort Parker and begins walking through the tall grass to speak with them. As a cocksure of his father, 48-year-old Benjamin Parker boldly ventures forth to negotiate. His younger brother Silas remains behind with his teenage sister Rachel Parker Plummer, a married 18-year-old with bright red hair who has chosen not to flee the fort with her baby. Benjamin Parker's decision to approach the Comanches is arrogant on the surface, but for the Indians clearly have the upper hand. But this selfless maneuver is also incredibly brave. The longer Benjamin can stall, the more time the women and children will have to flee and hide should the white flag be a hoax. The Comanche remain on their horses as Benjamin walks forward. Here comes my mom. Looking down at the white settler, they tell him their demands for a cow and directions to water. I'm going to stop there because my mom just walked in.